Graham Hancock is back. Hunting for Atlantis. This time he's in the Americas, and he brought Keanu Reeves along for the ride. Very cool. This video was highly requested by you all in my end-of-year Q&A, so we're going to take a look at the good, the bad, and, in my humble opinion, the absolute bonkers from Ancient Apocalypse Season 2. Let's see what he's talking about. Let's see what the evidence for this lost civilization is. Spoiler alert, there is none. And we're doing it in the glamorous setting of this little kitchenette in this new studio I've rented. It's a kitchen critique. It's a critique in the kitchen. Will this be a series I can maintain? Probably not. I'm not good at that. But we'll do one episode at least. This is also the last video I think I'm ever going to make talking about Graham Hancock. I just get too many mean emails, man. You know, being an archaeology YouTuber is so sweet most of the time. All the emails are so nice. But whenever I make a Graham Hancock video, scores of people send me mean emails, and I just want a peaceful life. I just want a peaceful life. Let's get into this. The good, the bad, the bonkers. Ancient Apocalypse Season 2. This little kitchen is so recently rented by me that I didn't bring any tea or coffee. So you'll have to forgive, I'm going to have to decant a McDonald's coffee into a mug. For $1.45, that's not a bad coffee, to be honest with you. I can totally see the appeal of Graham Hancock. I spend all day, every day, reading about archaeology, looking at archaeology stuff to try and make these cool videos for you. Even before I made these videos, I was just reading about it all the time. And yet, every time, every episode of Ancient Apocalypse, I learn something new and something really cool too. So if, you know, you don't have this background in archaeology, or you don't have the time to obsess over it all day, I can really see the appeal. You're going to see these amazing sites, full HD. There's going to be some experts giving their opinions on it. It's fascinating. Genuinely, I find it fascinating. And let me just say this here now as well. If hunting for Atlantis is what brings you joy and gives you that intellectual stimulation, go for it, man. Go for it. I won't judge you. We're literally all just apes on a rock in the middle of an incredibly hostile universe. So if that's what you want to do, go for it. Me personally, it's a speculation too far. I think, you know, it's not really a gap in our knowledge. I think our knowledge really contradicts the evidence for Atlantis at the minute, so just not interested in it. Like, speculation, too far for me. I like the evidence to guide my speculation a little bit more. But if you feel like you're onto something, like, go for it, man. You only got one life. Go for it. Try and find it. It is undeniable, I think. As much as I disagree with the man, it's undeniable he has increased the interest in prehistory. And you can debate because of the Atlantis stuff if that's positive or negative, but it's undeniable that more people know about prehistory because of Graham Hancock. Like, literally, just a couple of days ago, I was watching this comedian, Stavros Halkiakis, I can't pronounce his name well, is doing this losing weight challenge, and they were joking about being on the Joe Rogan podcast and talking about the Younger Dryas and stuff. The fact that you can turn on a random YouTube video of a comedian and they make a reference to the Younger Dryas, whether you like it or not, that's because of Graham Hancock. 100%. Now, me personally, I can do without Graham's wild speculation, right? Like how this show works. You get the expert opinion, you're at the cool site, you hear all about it, and then it cuts to Graham in the studio giving his wild, unfounded speculation. Oftentimes away from the expert, right? There's no ability for the expert being interviewed to provide a rebuttal. It's just, expert gives an interesting point about the site. Graham Hancock knows if we know everything. Of course, the expert says no, because we don't, and we never will. And then cut to Graham's crazy, unfounded speculation. There's a very clear format in the editing to make it seem like Graham's Hancock's ideas are based in the evidence. But it's cool stuff. It's cool stuff. Well, what cool stuff was I thinking of talking about? Seeing all the archaeological sites in the Amazon, that was crazy. I really loved, can't remember the name of it now. I didn't write it down. They went to this place where there's a huge panel of rock art, absolutely huge. And this archaeologist believes that some of these images might represent comets, in which case they're sort of dateable. And I find that really fascinating. If you guys saw my video on the oldest stories ever told, I'm really interested in oral history that is about events that are very dateable. Because the problem with all these flood myths that Graham goes on about is that floods are exceptionally common. Every year they happen. Every year, multiple might happen, right? But things like a comet passing by, things like volcanic eruptions, they're very rare and they're very dateable. So I found that whole discussion about the panels of rock art very interesting to me. I liked it a lot. What else was super cool? Oh man, all the astronomical knowledge that ancient people had. It's astounding, man. The ancestral Puebloans, these huge landscapes of monuments tracking the positions of the stars and all these celestial bodies. It's incredible. What a testament to human intelligence and reasoning and deduction that they were able to work out all these things just through careful observation. And the Mayans too, when they're talking about the Mayan temple and at the solstice, a little corner of the room gets illuminated. That's fantastic, man. That kind of stuff, it blew my mind. I didn't know. I knew about the ancestral Puebloans, and of course I'd heard that the Mayans were famous astronomers, but the beam of light illuminating specific points in the room, I had never heard of that. And yeah, shocked I was. Shocked in a good way. Ed Bernhardt, if you're watching this, you've got to come on my channel and talk about Mayan astronomy. It'll be incredible. I'd love to learn more. I'd literally love to learn more. This is controversial for some people, maybe. The other thing I really like Graham talking about is his drug use and shamanism. A part of me feels like that's his real passion, that this Atlantis stuff, it's just a way to talk about the shamanism. I think a Graham Hancock documentary where he's talking about psychedelic drugs through history and, the archaeological evidence of shamanism and the shamanism practices in modern day people, that would be so fascinating. And I think he could probably be a great host of that because he's so into psychedelics himself. He said on this Piers Morgan show, which is coming up later, this is a spoiler alert, but he said on Piers Morgan that he'd done ayahuasca over 70 times, which is a lot. And I wonder if that's what he really wants to do. And this Atlantis stuff is just a way to pay the bills. That's just my own speculation, but I wonder. Oh, I did take this funny screenshot, I thought, when they're talking about DMT crossing the blood-brain barrier. And look on Graham's face, it looks like something has crossed the blood-brain barrier. That's probably a little bit mean of me. Someone can screenshot me in all sorts of embarrassing positions. But it's just a funny face to be pulling when talking about DMT crossing the blood-brain barrier. And I thought the little chats with Keanu were fine. There's been some debate on the Graham Hancock subreddit about what did Keanu add to the show. Of course you're going to say yes if Keanu wants to come on your show. How could you not? And it was almost like he was a caricature of himself. I don't think I've seen a Keanu Reeves interview outside of, his appearances in films. And it's almost like he was playing a character, just his arm movements, all of this stuff. It was kind of like he was Neo. And in the first episode, I think he said Graham is on a quest. And that's fun. That's fun to be told by Keanu Reeves that you're on a quest. I'd love that. I'd love that. So those were my main good points. Let's get on to the bad stuff. Bad stuff. Speaking of bad stuff, your personal information is being sold by these shady groups called data brokers. But don't worry, Delete Me is here to help you. More and more of our information is online, and it's kind of scary how much people can find out about you. And it's all being sold by these data brokers. They're selling it to whoever, they don't care. And it's a big cause of online harassment, spam, fraud, all this bad stuff that comes along with our digital world. You have the right to have your information removed from these lists that are being bought and sold. Just who has the time to do that? Well, Delete Me does. They'll do all of that for you. They'll remove your information from these lists. They'll send you a report so that you can see how much of your information has been taken off. I'm not prepared to give up the fight for my privacy, to be honest with you. I'm not prepared to do that yet. And if you're not either, give Delete Me a try. You can get 20% off the consumer plans when you can go to joindeleteme.com/Stefan Milo. Give it a try. The links will be in the description, pinned comment. Thank you so much to Delete Me for supporting, hopefully, educational content online. And yeah, let's get back to the video. Bad stuff. Okay. Well, let's get this out of the way. For a show whose premise is to show the evidence of a lost civilization that existed about 12,000 years ago, you would think a lot of time would be spent talking about archaeological sites from 12,000 years ago, of which there are thousands upon thousands around the world. I think, unless I missed something, I think nothing was really talked about from that time period, which says a lot. It says a lot to me, right? What's there to say about that? If you have an opportunity to show the whole world your evidence for this thing that happened 12,000 years ago, you would think you would show it, right? And the fact that not a single archaeological site from that time period was mentioned is really telling. It's really telling. He just doesn't have the evidence, guys. He just doesn't have the evidence. He did briefly mention the Younger Dryas, calling it this ancient apocalypse. Just so you know, I've made a whole video on this years ago now on how bad was the Younger Dryas. I don't think we have evidence that it was particularly terrible for humans at that time. If you lived in the far north, it might be, maybe Britain was depopulated at the time. Seems like Hokkaido in Japan was depopulated. Certainly, if you lived in the far north and there's a sudden return to the Ice Age temperatures, you might not have a great time. But still to this day, people live in the Arctic, and humans are extremely adaptable and have lived in the Arctic for thousands upon thousands of years. It wasn't necessarily the end of the world for them. Maybe if it was caused by an asteroid impact, I definitely wouldn't want to be in the way of that. But we also don't know that. To me, that whole debate about whether it was caused by an asteroid is irrelevant anyway to this whole debate, because the point is, how does humans react to this environmental change? There's also not really much evidence of the Younger Dryas impacting equatorial regions, the southern hemisphere. Those regions may have even gotten warmer as ocean currents were blocked. Graham thinks that evidence for his civilization is going to be in these tropical regions that were less affected by the Younger Dryas. So where's the evidence for them? We have archaeological sites from these time periods in these places. So where is this lost civilization? The fact that we're not shown any evidence of it, that Graham never points to a single artifact and says, this is from them, is really telling, in my opinion. The thing is with the Younger Dryas and this calling it an ancient apocalypse, Graham, of course, needs to present it as this huge world-ending event because he has to explain how there's no evidence for his civilization. He has to try and justify that somehow, so the Younger Dryas becomes this incredible boogeyman in Earth's geological history. Do we have the evidence to support that? I don't think so. Speaking of artifacts and evidence, though, I feel like in the whole series there were two big points that Graham tried to use as evidence for this lost civilization. The first was the similarity between pottery made in the Amazon and in the Americas and pottery made in Greece. It's multicolored. They're using geometric patterns. And to be honest, for me personally, that's extremely weak evidence because really, truly, any human group making pottery could think to include these design elements. And probably they have. Probably you could find geometric patterns on every piece of pottery from every group that's making pottery, right? Even the examples shown on screen, they didn't look alike to me. They're not exactly the same. And so again, think about when Graham's making the show, he gets an opportunity to present his evidence to this huge audience that's never going to pick up one of his books, never going to listen to Joe Rogan. If that's the evidence you're presenting, I think you don't have a lot. That's my opinion. I think you don't have a lot. The other piece of evidence, which I'm really interested in, because I also made a whole video on this, is about how South American people have more ancestry related to Australasian people than would have been expected, would have been predicted. They have this little bit of a signal of more shared ancestry with these groups. I interviewed the geneticists behind this discovery. They, at the minute, the simplest model to explain this is that there is this group that they dubbed Population Y, which is related to both of these groups, admixed with both of these groups. Go watch that video, because the geneticists explain this whole thing, the discovery of it, what it means. It's very, very interesting. I'm very proud of that video. They believe basically that this Australasian DNA was in Native Americans when they reached America. And the more we understand about DNA, the more it seems that there's more evidence of this Australasian ancestry across Asian populations. Now, Australasian populations are kind of pushed to the south, Australia, Papua New Guinea, Andaman Islands, but their modern distribution is not necessarily their distribution in prehistory, right? And a lot of times have changed since then. There's a whole Neolithic revolution, farming communities spread out across the region. So the evidence isn't great that it was caused by this trans-Pacific voyage. It's not that it's impossible, but as the geneticists phrased it in the video that I made with them, the evidence is moving away from that. The more they learn about this signal, the less and less and less it seems like this trans-Pacific voyage, basically. There is still an interesting phenomenon that it hasn't yet been detected in Native American populations further north. That's still being debated. Why that is? Could be an issue with sampling. Could be an issue with population change since European contact. Could be that the Native Americans who reached the Americas first were a more diverse group. And just in the twists and turns of history, the people with that Australasian ancestry ended up in South America. It's very interesting, actually. It's very, very cool. But to say that it is evidence of this lost civilization, I think is a stretch. Let's just say that. I think it's a stretch. The evidence is moving in the other direction. Okay, let's get on to the bonkers. The bonkers stuff. I think this is why you're all watching. I don't know what it is. I think in this season of Ancient Apocalypse, they tried to tone down the bonkersness of the whole situation. Season 1, there was a lot of bonkersness. This season, they toned it down. Graham Hancock didn't attack, academic archaeology in any way, really. But the whole, as I said at the start, the whole show works on this way of they'll interview an expert and it'll cut to Graham's speculation in a different place, different studio. And some of these speculations are so crazy, I don't think Graham believes them. That's my honest opinion. I don't think Graham believes them. And I came across this blog post, or this blog post was shared with me from Graham back in the day. It's interesting. It kind of gives an insight into his frame of mind, I think. He says, a parallel for what I do is to be found in the work of an attorney defending a client in a court of law. My client is a lost civilization, and it is my responsibility to persuade the jury, the public, that this civilization did exist. Since the prosecution, orthodox academics naturally seek to make the opposite case as effectively as they can, I must be equally effective and, when necessary, equally ruthless. So it is certainly true, as many of my critics have pointed out, that I am selective with the evidence I present. Of course I'm selective. It isn't my job to show my client in a bad light. Isn't that kind of interesting? It's not what I would call a quest for truth, as Keanu would put it.
No way.
That quote makes it seem to me that he's going to present the case for a lost civilization regardless of what the evidence is. It doesn't inspire confidence that Graham believes in this stuff, in my opinion. I can't read his mind, but that's a very odd thing to say, right? To say that you're especially deliberately selective with the evidence. And then there was this other really funny moment recently where Graham went on Piers Morgan, who titled the show like Britain's Ultimate Wind-Up Merchant or something, which is funny. But in this show, he was asked to explain this idea of sonic levitation, that the Egyptians moved the granite blocks in the pyramid through singing, through chanting, all of this stuff.
I have a weird theory, and it is a weird theory, that the granite blocks used to build the pyramids were somehow levitated into place.
That's not a
by
theory.
Acoustics.
You've been listening to my critics too much.
Is this not true?
It is true. I've said
That the acoustics
when
of priests
pressed on
chanting
this,
could have led to levitation of bricks.
Yeah, but that's not my theory. That's not a theory.
What is that?
That's an off-the-cuff remark. If you look, and I'll stand by it.
I think that surprised Graham that he was asked this question, because at first he said, you've been listening to my critics too much, even though it's in his books and on his interviews on Joe Rogan and stuff. And then he says he stands by it, and then it's just sort of idle speculation. He's just throwing these ideas out there.
That kind of thing I've also talked a little bit about.
But tell me about acoustic levitation.
What you would find is that it occupies perhaps 20 pages across 8,000 pages of my books.
I mean, it's there.
It's there.
So it's a theory you've espoused.
No, it's an interest of mine. When I read ancient texts...
What's the difference between a theory and an interest?
Hang on.
Oh, come on.
And then it's the idea that Egyptians built a pyramid with a ramp is equally as ludicrous as they built it through singing and chanting.
But it's when you say, well, that is completely implausible, right? The way that we all believe the pyramids is plausible. But you just float in there that it could have been levitation, acoustic power from chanting priests. I would dare to say to you, Graham, with all due respect, that is surely more ludicrous as a potential theory than the one that we believe.
If I were saying this is absolutely how it were built, it would be.
Yeah, but you're deliberately tantalising us with the idea of chanting priests, raising stones to the skies.
Then the Egyptologists are tantalising us with the idea of a ramp.
I mean, what does he think about that? There's no way that he thinks a ramp is an equally ridiculous idea as singing these blocks into place, chanting these blocks into place with these special powers. I can't believe he thinks that. It reminds me of this, there's some meme I saw of ancient aliens building the pyramids with ramps. You know, whoever built the pyramids, whether it was the ancient Egyptians, which it was, or this lost civilization, which it wasn't, I promise you they used ramps. In some way they used ramps. Now, did a ramp go up the whole side of the pyramid? I think not. I think maybe a ramp went as high as the Grand Gallery, something like that. And maybe it went as high as that void above the Grand Gallery. And they had some internal mechanism to lift these blocks. Because a ramp going the full height of the pyramid would be enormous. But a ramp going a third of the height of the pyramid? I think that's doable. I think that's extremely doable. I just can't believe he thinks that is equally ridiculous as singing. So saying that, he presents these ridiculous ideas about Rapa Nui. I don't think he believes them. I don't think he believes them. Rapa Nui is not some unexamined place. It's not like the Amazon or the Sahara, even though we have archaeological sites from both those places, but it's very small. And because of the huge monuments, archaeologists have been interested in it for a long time. I think for such a small island, the amount of archaeological work done there is a lot, really a lot. And Graham speculates that these moai were not built by the people of Rapa Nui in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century, but were built by this lost civilization. And that his lost civilization lived on a landmass that has now been, submerged since the end of the Ice Age. First of all, I would love to look at a map and see how much the sea level rose at Rapa Nui, because it doesn't rise everywhere equally, right? If there's sharp cliffs, it basically could be the same landmass as it was in the Ice Age. So I would like to see that. If you look at the position of the moai now, they ring the island. They hug the island. Why would this lost civilization put them in this position? In the position of our modern coastline? That makes no sense. That really makes no sense whatsoever. And why on such a small island would evidence of this civilization, this people, not be higher up? Right? They're excavating the moai from the side of this volcano. Why wouldn't we find evidence of their life there? It's too ridiculous to think that this civilization traveled the earth, got to Rapa Nui, and then wouldn't put any village further uphill. They only lived right on the beach. They never went uphill, never had a single lunch up there, never did anything up there. It's ridiculous. He says that these moai are buried under thousands of years of sediment, but these moai are buried in a quarry. If there's anywhere in the whole world where sediment can build up quickly, it's on the side of a quarry on a hill. It's a quarry on a hill. That's got to be number one sediment increasing spot in the whole world. And I just think Graham knows this. I just think he's just coming up with stuff to say on TV. I don't think he believes any of this. Another really odd factor is that Graham totally ignores the oral history of the Rapa Nui people, about how they're walking it into place, about how these are the statues of their ancestors, all this stuff, how it wasn't completed until they had put the face in. It was really interesting listening to the historian of the Rapa Nui people. He ignores that, which is so strange because usually he is so vocal about sticking up for oral history when it supports him. Like the case of Quetzalcoatl and these knowledge bringers. He's always of the opinion that oral history couldn't possibly be changed, that the Spanish couldn't influence Mesoamerican oral history in any way. But here on Rapa Nui, suddenly the nuance exists. And now oral history can be discarded on a whim. It makes no sense. Can't have it both ways. Can't have it both ways.
Another really strange thing he says is that they didn't build up the knowledge to learn how to do these things. I mean, humans try new things. That's what they do. And the people of Rapa Nui are capable of developing a tradition all of their own. They don't need this huge amount of time to do it. Like, once you've got an organized society, you can do these things. They're perfectly capable. What's funny is that he also says other statues are found across the Pacific. So it's like, do they have this cultural tradition of building statues or don't they? You know, who's Graham to say they haven't got the knowledge to do it?
Oh, and the craziest thing, before I forget, he wonders if the idea behind the statues in Rapa Nui and in places like the Middle East were sort of inspired and built by the same people because they have their arms by their sides. Come on, man. Come on. That's obviously the easiest way to illustrate a statue. It's hard to do one with their arms flying about. Almost did an Elon Musk then. This just isn't evidence. It's just not serious evidence. He's an educated man. He knows this isn't serious evidence, in my opinion. He knows that, guys. He just knows it. Oh, and before I forget, Rongo. Again in the show, he wonders if Rongo, this written script that the people of Rapa Nui developed, was perhaps the alphabet of this lost civilization. And he admits, I'm speculating. But it's like the development of written language is actually quite a rare thing in human history. Hasn't happened a ton of times. It's a really cool and unique and special thing that the people of Rapa Nui did develop written language on their own, on that island. And to just discard it, just on a whim, for nothing, for no reason, it's not serious evidence. It's not serious evidence at all. He doesn't believe this. He doesn't believe this. You're not gonna like me for saying this, some of us hardcore fans, but this is where the accusations of racism come from. That the crowning glory of these civilizations, their monumental architecture, their written language, their ability to explore and navigate, were just given to them by someone else. Right? That's where the accusation of racism comes from. You may not like me saying that, but you can see where people get that interpretation from, surely. The one interesting thing I will say is that he did interview this archaeologist about when did bananas arrive on Rapa Nui. And bananas seem to be spread by humans. And in this one sediment, they found evidence of bananas from thousands of years before the evidence of humans arriving in Rapa Nui on any other place. That was really interesting. That was the most interesting thing about Rapa Nui, other than hearing the historian of Rapa Nui talk about the Moai. And I went and found that paper. It's a really interesting one. Who knows how many people explored the Pacific and how far they got in prehistory. The only thing I will say is that in that paper, the authors concede that this evidence of bananas on the island is not supported by cores taken anywhere else on the island. So maybe it's an outlier. There's something about the ground in that particular spot that's been turned over, something like that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. That was genuinely interesting and an actual thing that's measurable and all of this stuff. But all this nonsense about maybe there's a village below the water. Maybe the Moai just happened to be in the position of the modern coastline. Maybe Rongo is the script that was used in Atlantis. It's all nonsense. He doesn't believe it. He's just making a TV show, guys. He's just making a TV show. That's all there is to it, I think. Second piece of bonkersness, the Incan Empire. I think I'm right in saying the Incan Empire was the largest empire in the Americas before European arrival. And according to rigorous academic sources like National Geographic Kids, the empire had a population of maybe 12 million people. So this is a big society, right? Very, very big society, capable of achieving a lot, capable of mobilizing tens of thousands of people to achieve its goals. Despite all that, Graham thinks they couldn't have moved these rocks at Sacsayhuaman. Even though the rock is quite soft, and even though it only traveled a few miles, he just thinks they didn't do it. This large empire didn't do it, couldn't do it. And that's so strange. Why think that? The Roman Empire could move large rocks. They moved obelisks from Egypt to Rome. Egypt as well, similar society, carved and moved those obelisks. Why can't the Incan Empire move the rocks to build Sacsayhuaman? And even if the civilization before the Incas moved them, why couldn't they do it? Why does it have to be this project from another civilization with no evidence provided? It just doesn't make sense. He then goes to this other ritual site with this guy, clearly like some esoteric alternative researcher guy who believes that the Incans couldn't have made these ritual sites because of the style of them and all of this stuff. And like when they're saying this, the rocks they're standing by, they're just carved rocks. Very, very simple carved rocks. And I don't mean to, talk down about the achievements of the Inca, but why couldn't the Inca have done this? It's not out of this world. It's not astronomical. A society of 12 million people couldn't have carved this religious site. Probably this religious site goes back older than the Incas, I'm sure. But there's nothing crazy about the architecture there. Nothing crazy at all. Graham always goes on about how we've got to, not underestimate people in prehistory, way back in prehistory, in the Paleolithic and this stuff. And that's a thing I 100% agree with. On my channel constantly talks about how cool the Paleolithic was. But Graham, for some reason, really discards the abilities of people in the 15th century. They could definitely do these things. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And again, I just don't think he believes it. When he's standing there next to a carved rock saying that Incans couldn't have done it, I don't think he believes it, guys. I don't think he believes it. One thing he said about it, this I think they call it polygonal architecture. These very nicely carved blocks that fit in these sort of dry stone walls. It's very cool, very interesting form of architecture. Graham says there's like no evidence for it in sort of simpler pieces of architecture, no evidence of its development or anything like that before you get these huge blocks at Sacsayhuaman, which I think is not true. Very quickly on Google, you can find many such examples of these things, including at Incan sites like Machu Picchu. Like on screen, you're looking at a rock at Machu Picchu right now. Is this not a simple example of the kind of architecture he's talking about? At this Incan site? Why is it so hard to believe? Maybe I'm missing something, but the Incans could have done this, guys. A huge empire, millions of people. They can't move a few rocks, carve a few rocks, can't put their effort and intelligence into designing cool architecture? What are we doing? Of course they can. Of course they can. Oh, and this really shocked me. This really shocked me that Graham didn't mention this, right? So the link between Rapa Nui and South America is, according to Graham, this polygonal architecture. There's one stand for the Moai that kind of has a different style of architecture. Maybe it's more similar to Incan style of architecture. He wonders if that's therefore evidence that they were put there by this lost civilization. First of all, that archaeological site in Rapa Nui, it has radiocarbon dates around it, from around that statue base. They all date to exactly the time period you would expect, like the Middle Ages in the European chronology, 13th, 14th, 15th century. But also, the thing that he didn't mention, and it's one of the coolest things to have been found by archaeology, is that we know that the Polynesians did make it to South America. We have quite great evidence for that now. There was always the case of the sweet potato. How was that across Polynesia? But now it's really been confirmed by genetics. I interviewed the geneticist behind this too. And that's one of the coolest examples of human exploration in all of human history. The fact that the Polynesian people could make it the entire width of the Pacific Ocean is crazy. We even also have Incan accounts of them trying to do the opposite, sail the Pacific in the opposite direction. And so, even if these two sites are connected because of their architecture, I think these people could have come up with it themselves personally. But even if they are connected, it still could have happened in the 15th century, 14th century. Why didn't he mention that? Surely that's such a great example of exploration. I think he just didn't mention it because then it would be like, oh, well, probably it was from the 15th century then, not from this lost civilization. You gotta stop underestimating people in the 15th century, Graham. The people in the 15th century were as smart as the builders of Atlantis, okay? They could move these rocks. Gosh, I've been talking a long time. I hope you've all fallen asleep now. I know you guys watch my videos to fall asleep. I hope you're having sweet dreams. If you're not, just take a deep breath. I need to take a deep breath too. There you go. Deep breath. Loosen the muscles. Get to sleep. The final bonkers thing I'm going to mention. Graham was at the Mayans this time. He's with Ed Bernhardt, talking about their incredible astronomical knowledge. It's fantastic stuff. Like I said at the start, all the illumination of different points in the pyramids at different times of year. Mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing. They're talking about the sophistication of the Mayan calendar. It's incredible. All the mathematics and the understanding of an astronomy that underpinned it. Wow. What a testament to, as I said, human knowledge, ingenuity, understanding. It's really like science before we had, this formal understanding of science and the scientific method. This is really like, they're doing science out there. It's incredible. And Graham basically wonders if it was inherited by them, because they had numbers going up to the millions. I just think that's such a silly thing to say. Why can't the Mayans have needed numbers in the millions? Why can't have they just pursued maths for the love of maths in the same way that like ancient Greece did, or something like that, and ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia and Rome and all these places where ancient people were so curious and pushing our understanding of science and maths and philosophy. Why can't the Mayans have also been doing that? I mean, clearly they were. Clearly they were doing that. To just think, maybe it was someone else because the numbers are big. It's just silly, man. It doesn't believe it. I can't believe he believes this stuff.
I know Graham is really keen for his ideas to be taken seriously and that his speculations are equal to archaeologists, but really, where is the substance here? There's nothing here. The Mayan calendar was not the product of the people of Mesoamerica because it just has big numbers, up to a couple million, a few million. There's no substance here, man. There's nothing here to take seriously. It's really nonsense. It's really just a fart in the wind, man. What's that saying? Like, something that can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Probably this calendar has been under development for thousands of years before anyone conceived of themselves as Mayan or anything like that. So these things do develop over time, I think. These people were not just like chilling, hunting and gathering, and then these knowledge givers arrived, and boom, here's a complete Mayan calendar. Here's farming. Let's build a pyramid, all of this stuff. That's just obviously not how it went down. They developed this calendar themselves over centuries through careful observation of the stars. And for the love of the game, for the love of the maths game, just dismiss it just because they had numbers in the millions. Really, guys, really, truly, I think it's just making a TV show, man. I don't think he believes this stuff. I think he believes in the shamanism stuff. I think that's really where his heart lies. I think you're not going to do ayahuasca 70 times. If not, but all this just random speculation, and in total opposition to all evidence and human reasoning. I don't know. I don't think he believes it. And that's part of why I'm not making another video about Graham Hancock again. Because, what's the point? It doesn't believe it. That's all I got to say. All I got to say. Kitchen Critique, episode 1. The first and last episode.